Hello, everyone. Today, I want to cover what I believe to be the most important event in the history of the world, at least for the last 1,000 years, and that is the discovery of the Americas, right? Also because it's one of the most important events in the history of the world, it's also become extremely controversial in the last 20, 30 years. And I want to be able to talk about this in a very nuanced way, in a very honest way, because one of the things that I always find very complicated, at least lately, is to have honest conversations about Columbus and the discovery of the Americas, right? So let's get started. All right, so there are a lot of historical lessons to be learned about Columbus and the discovery of the Americas, particularly, for example, the changing perspectives of history. How for a great period of time we used to glorify Columbus, and glorify Columbus to a point of, he was one of our greatest heroes, and now lately he has been villainized, right? And you can see that there's been kind of like a lot of concentrated efforts to diminish all the accomplishments, and you see people talk about how Columbus was just here by accident, that he's just dumb, that he never really knew he was in America. So there's a lot of lessons to learn about how this changing perspectives. You can also learn about, for example, how the discovery of the Americas changed the world forever, the Columbian Exchange. However, today what I want to do is that I want to concentrate on the events that transpired on October 12th, 1492, and the events that followed. And I want to offer a nuanced interpretation of what happened and how those events changed the history of the world. All right, so number one, yes, Columbus is here by accident. He doesn't know where he is. He's trying to find a faster trade route to India, and he's gonna land in America by accident. And one of the very common myths is that Columbus was sailing because he was trying to prove that Earth was not flat. Right? That is a complete myth. That is not correct. Uh, but the problem with Columbus is mainly that the people around the world don't have a consensus on how big the Earth is. Okay, so Columbus specifically is of the school of thought that Earth is a little bit smaller, right? And let me show you the map that Columbus was following.
All right, so this is the map that Christopher Columbus was following. This is a map from a famous cosmographer of the time. His name is Paolo de Toscanelli. And as you can see in this map does not include the Pacific Ocean or the entire continent of America, right? So it doesn't mean that those people were dumb or that they were incompetent. Is that there's no consensus. They really don't know how big the Earth was. They basically miscalculated the size of Earth by about 10,000 kilometers. So basically, Columbus thinks that if he sails from Europe and he just sails west, that he's going to reach India, right? However, as we know, there's an entire continent in the middle, so that's not going to happen. And that is why Columbus keeps insisting after four voyages, right, that this must be somewhere in India. They just don't know this is a new continent, right? And it's not that Columbus himself is the only one that refuses to accept that this is a new continent, is that everyone is basically figuring out that this is a new continent, right? So I just want to put a little historical context on it. What about, people keep getting confused about, why is Columbus not understanding this? Why is he dumb? Whatever. Is the reality of the time that the world had not been mapped and they just don't know where they are.
And so Columbus lands in the Caribbean islands in October 12th, 1492, and he encounters a group of people called the Taino, right? So the Taino were described as very generous, as being, I think Columbus even describes them as being very innocent. And initially, the relationship between Columbus and the Taino Indians is very friendly, right? It's very good, right? So upon going back to Spain, Columbus presents the king and queen, with gold and resources, and he even brings some of the Taino Indians. And this is basically making the Spanish king and queen realize that that is an opportunity, right? So the expectations are going to change, the goals are going to change. Spain now is going to see these islands in India, right, where they think they are, as we can go settle, right? We can go settle in these islands, rather than go and explore. All right. So at first, the relationship between the Indians and the Spanish is good. However, it's going to turn sour when all these things change. Right. When the Spanish go with 17 ships, 1,200 people, ready to settle, share land with the Indians. This is going to change, and it makes sense, right? Because this clash of culture is gonna bring a lot of problems, right? Again, language, religion, way of life. The Indians do things, you know, that the Spanish don't like. For example, their religion. For example, most of them, practice some form of ritualistic cannibalism. In general, their way of life. Some of them don't wear any clothes. So the Spanish are very uncomfortable by all of this, right? And by the same token, the Americans are very, bothered by the idea of these people are just coming to, settle, take over. They just think that they can come here and share the land, right? So it's going to lead to a lot of very difficult situations, right? So I usually like to explain this, right? When the Spanish eventually go, Columbus himself does 4 trips, right? So within those 4 trips, right, people imagine that Columbus goes there and just slaughters all the Indians and just kills everyone, ravages, plunders, takes gold. This is not a reality, right? The conquest of the Caribbean was extremely chaotic, right? Because you need to think about it in terms of numbers, right? As much trips and as much people that the Spanish can bring to America, it's not going to be enough to just come over here and overtake the indigenous populations, right? They are in the millions, right? They are in the millions. So it's going to be very, very difficult, right? So those, 15, 20 years that, the conquest of the Caribbean happens is going to be extremely chaotic. It's going to be full of, tension, full of violence. It's going to be sometimes good relations, sometimes bad relations. You can see examples of everything. The number one problem is going to be diseases, right? Diseases are going to end up ravaging the Native American population and, taking about 90% of the population, right? So that is really going to facilitate the Spanish into, settling the Caribbean rather faster and easier, right? So when people talk about lately about, 90% of the indigenous population perished, lately they've been reimagining this as the Spanish killed 90% of the people, violently, right? This was due to diseases and it was very unintentional also, right? So this conquest of the Caribbean is full of, misfortunes, is full of violence, is full of, horrible things, right? However, trying to imagine this as the Spanish are here slaughtering everyone, taking up their land, and Columbus is responsible for all of this, in my opinion, is incorrect, right? Columbus is not intentionally trying to do this. I think the best way for me to explain Columbus to you is that he's a navigator. He's not a governor. He's not someone who understands, how to govern, territories. In fact, he's almost never in the islands. He's always trying to, still find this waterway to India, and of course, he's never gonna find it. But he's a horrible governor. He's pretty bad at it. He usually leaves his brother Diego or his other brother Bartolome in charge, and they're horrible at it. They very quickly use their technological advantages, their military advantages to, overtake villages, and they start taking advantage of the Indians. A lot of abuses are going to happen, and this is one of the reasons why Columbus is going to be put in jail, right? Because even for the standard of the time, that was pretty bad, right? One of the things that it's important to put into consideration is that from the beginning, Spain always wanted this to be Pacific, all right? They try to integrate the Indians into the empire. They try to make them, part of the empire via, religion and via politics. They really don't want this to be a military overtake of the Americas. Uh, the problem with this is that, Spain is about 4,000 miles away from all of this, right? So they're making a lot of rules about not mistreating the Indians. They're making a lot of rules about, you need to allow them to do this and do that and not force labor and don't do this to Indians. So enforcing this laws here is going to be very difficult because if you think about it, who's here to enforce the laws? Yes, Spain wants things to happen in a certain way. However, they're not here to make sure that it is happening, all right? It is up to the friars. It is up to, the religious people to actually try to make this peacefully, right? But it's going to be very difficult. So this 15, 20 years of the conquest of the Caribbean, again, are going to be extremely, extremely chaotic, are going to be very, 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 very difficult. However, it would be an oversimplification to say Spain got here, Columbus started, massacring and murdering and ravaging and pillaging and plundering, and it was, fast and easy and whatever, right? It's extremely chaotic, all right, and it's full of good relations, bad relations. It's more bad than good. There's, examples of everything, and it's going to be mainly diseases that is going to end up ravaging first the Caribbean, and then eventually when is mainland America. Also, diseases are going to take a very important role in the Europeans to be able to settle in the Americas.
And so I think people make a big mistake in trying to encapsulate Columbus as a hero or as a villain. He doesn't have to be either of them. He's a man of his time, and he's from a time that is almost impossible for us to understand, right? 500 years ago, to really discover a new world, right? And to try to make the best out of it. It's something that it's impossible for us to understand, right? So, having this historical resentments or harboring this, resentments towards European countries and the events that transpired in the, conquest of the Americas, it's really pointless because there is no point in trying to diminish the accomplishments of Columbus or the European nations that eventually settled in America. Doing this is not going to change the past, is not going to make things better, but we can acknowledge that Columbus, maybe wasn't a hero, maybe he didn't get here because he wanted to discover a new continent, he stumbled into America by accident, but we can also acknowledge that he started the age of exploration and the Columbian Exchange, revolutionized the world forever, and it led for us to be here, right? So harboring this historical resentments really doesn't take you anywhere, right? And it really there's not much to be gained because you're not gonna change anything, and it's gonna make you be resentful of the past that led you to be here, all right? You are the result of these things. What we can do is learn from it, right? What we can do is understand who we are, right? And move forward in a positive direction rather than trying to, go back in time and America would have been better, or if we would have been here, we would have been there. These are really pointless exercises, all right? Because at the end of the day, the world is what it is, all right? The world is what it became. And so learning about this connection of the old world with the new world and this interaction and how it transformed the world forever has a lot of very fascinating lessons to learn. All right. From understanding the world around us, look at your name, look at your last name, the way we look, the way we act, our cultures, our traditions, it can all be traced back to 500 years ago, right? But most significantly, you can learn about who we really are as people, right? Because we're not Americans and we're not Europeans, right? We're a mixture of the old world and the new world, right? People from 500 years ago wouldn't recognize us, right? The way we look, right? We will look completely alien to them, right? Because we became something entirely new. And I think this is something to be very proud of, right? And at the end of the day, I think this is what we should be concentrating on, all right? Who we are as Americans, right? Uh, our past as the first Americans, but also that point in time when the old world connected with the new world and we became something entirely new, right? How this Columbian exchange transformed the world forever and led to the world that we understand today, all right? And this is the main lesson, to be learned from the discovery of the Americas, right? So, anyways, guys, this is all I have for you today. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be around, okay? Be safe.